Everyone knows Winston Churchill as the unshakable wartime leader, the Bulldog in a bowler hat, the voice that rallied Britain through its darkest hours. But what if I told you that the entire course of that history, his speeches, his leadership, even his survival, once hung on the angle of a single door? Not a grand act of espionage, not a dramatic gunfight, just a door left ajar by mistake. It sounds absurd, doesn't it? But hidden in the footnotes of World War II intelligence files lies a story so strange, so steeped in irony, that it almost feels fictional. Almost. To understand this bizarre moment, we need to wind the clock back to London in 1940. The Blitz was in full swing. German bombs were falling almost nightly, and Churchill had become both a military target and a symbol. The Nazis understood that removing him wouldn't just cripple British command, it would fracture British morale. And they weren't the only ones thinking that. Within the smoke and tension of wartime London, intelligence agencies were in overdrive. Double agents moved through smoky pubs. Saboteurs probed weak spots in British security. And one operation, little known, quietly shelved after it failed, was different. Its goal wasn't to spread fear. It wasn't even to destroy infrastructure. Its goal was surgical, precise, and final. The idea was simple in theory: eliminate Churchill. But pulling it off required more than just courage. It required access. And access, as any spy will tell you, comes not through walls, but through patterns, habits, logistics. The plan, according to declassified documents, was built around a moment when Churchill would pass through a specific corridor in the basement level of the war rooms, his hidden command center beneath Whitehall. The location was chosen for a reason. It was deep underground, shielded from bombing, and sparsely guarded during certain hours. The attacker, according to postwar MI5 records, had trained for months, likely in occupied Europe, on a replica of the hallway, learning every corner, every shadow, every echo. The operation even had a name, one scribbled in red pencil across a surveillance report: Grey Ghost. Now here's where it gets surreal. On the night in question, everything was in place. The operative was reportedly inside, disguised as a maintenance worker. He carried no gun, too loud, no explosives, too obvious. Instead, he had a modified stiletto blade, small enough to conceal in a toolkit, sharp enough to kill silently. He waited, watched, knew from intercepted schedules the exact minute Churchill would exit the map room and cross the corridor alone, as he often did to collect his thoughts before delivering commands. He rehearsed it again in his mind. Step out, one quick motion, fade back into the shadows, no heroics, no trace. But then something went wrong, something stupid. Something no war planner, no saboteur, no intelligence agency could have predicted. A cleaning crew member, an old man, temporary staff, finished his duties early. He left through a side door, and in his rush he didn't close it. That door led directly into the corridor. It had always been shut during walkthroughs, scheduled and locked. But that night, it hung open. And that, believe it or not, changed everything. The open door should have been irrelevant. It wasn't part of the plan. It wasn't even visible from the spot the assassin had rehearsed. But air moves strangely in tight corridors. Sound moves even stranger. And through that single Ajar door, something reached him. Something that hadn't been in any briefing, blueprint, or practice run. Voices, low, muffled conversation, and footsteps. More than one pair. The plan had relied on silence, on isolation, on Churchill being alone. But now, thanks to that door, the would-be assassin heard at least two others in the corridor. One of them, by the way they moved, carried weight, heavy boots on polished floors. A security detail, a military escort. There was no time to investigate. The moment was slipping away. Inside his chest, panic began to crawl up the spine. He'd been trained for precision, not improvisation. The moment to strike was narrow, and he knew it. Churchill, punctual as ever, was due to emerge at any second. But the air had changed. The soundscape had changed. The margin for error was gone. One misstep now, and it wouldn't be assassination. It would be suicide. And so, in that instant, a decision was made. Not bold, not dramatic, just quiet retreat. He stepped back into a maintenance closet, closed the door, and vanished into the service tunnels beneath the war rooms. Minutes later, Churchill passed through the hallway, alone, just as planned. Except no one was waiting. The cleaning man who'd left the door open was later reprimanded for breaking protocol. No one, not even he, realized what that open door had interrupted. No alarms were raised. No suspect was caught. There were no headlines, no arrests. Only a footnote found decades later in an intelligence memo that mentioned unexplained irregularities in corridor movement patterns on that particular night. That's all. A door, a sound, a doubt, and a man who stepped back. But let's pause for a moment and consider. What if the door had been closed? What if silence had reigned? What if Churchill had passed through that corridor and never come out? The British war effort, without its bulldog voice, its iron optimism, its iconic speeches, would it have held together? Would Roosevelt have trusted another leader as much? Would the Allies have coordinated the same way? Would Britain, in the chaos of sudden loss, have faltered just long enough for Hitler to exploit it? This is the shadow history we never see. The history where the cleaning man takes 5 more seconds, where the door clicks shut, where one man's silence leads to another's death. And the world reshapes around it. Instead, we got a ghost, a plan aborted, and a moment, one of the smallest in the war, that may have kept its largest figure alive. What followed was silence. Not in the world above. London was still under threat, bombs still fell, war still raged. But in the underground war rooms, in that narrow hallway, the attempt faded like a shadow retreating from light. The assassin disappeared. His identity remains unknown. The operation, codenamed Grey Ghost, was never mentioned in official wartime records. No arrests, no follow-up investigation. Just one internal report filed weeks later, noting a breach in corridor security procedures and unusual auditory anomalies, logged by an MI5 field monitor on duty nearby. So how do we know about it at all? Because of a footnote. Buried in a declassified 1964 British intelligence review, it described a shelved assassination plot against a wartime official. That cryptic phrase set off decades of speculation among historians and intelligence analysts. Slowly, fragments began to surface. A war diary entry from a Canadian observer noting a sudden spike in security drills around Churchill's schedule. A personal letter from a former intelligence officer alluding to a failed operation in the Whitehall tunnels. But the most compelling clue? A surviving memo from a U.S. liaison officer to MI6 describing an intercepted message, likely German, that referenced a failed opportunity to cut off the head of the British lion. The date? The same night the cleaning door was left open. And here the pieces begin to click. The idea that Churchill survived not because of strategic brilliance or luck in battle, or even elite security, but because of janitorial error, is deeply uncomfortable. It undermines our stories about control, about strength, about heroes and systems. But that's exactly what makes it so revealing. History isn't a polished stage play, it's a backstage mess of crossed wires, wrong assumptions, and improvised timing. A story not just of victories and villains, but of missed chances and malfunctioning hinges. Let's think this through. Had Churchill died that night, Britain would have faced not only the emotional shock of losing its leader, but a tangible collapse in command cohesion. Churchill was not just prime minister, he was a center of gravity. His oratory, his personal diplomacy with Roosevelt, his willingness to defy both parliament and panic, these were not traits easily replicated. His replacement would have faced the same Nazis, the same bombs, but with half the authority and none of the momentum. Would Roosevelt have committed Lend-Lease support as quickly without Churchill's persuasion? Would Stalin have trusted an unknown successor to hold the Western line while he bled on the Eastern Front? Even Churchill's famous speeches, "We shall fight on the beaches," their finest hour, never was so much owed by so many, might never have been spoken. These words didn't just inspire Britain, they rallied the world. Without them, would the public will in Allied countries have held as firm? Would the war have dragged longer or turned toward negotiation rather than victory? And then there's the deeper domino, a slower one, cultural, philosophical. What if the symbol of unwavering leadership had been cut short right when it was needed most? Would the post-war world so shaped by Churchill's stubborn clarity have charted a different course in its balance of power? All of that, all of it, because one man left one door slightly open, a mistake, a misstep, a moment, and the assassin trained for precision felt just enough doubt to back away. We often imagine history as a series of bold moves. Wars declared, treaties signed, revolutions ignited. But sometimes history hinges not on action, but on hesitation. Not on a shot fired, but on one never taken. And this story, like so many on this channel, is a quiet reminder of just how fragile the path between what was and what could have been really is. A door, a breeze, a single choice made in a second, and through that moment, the survival of one man who, for better or worse, shaped the fate of nations. The open door became a metaphor for everything that followed. It let in a draft of uncertainty, and that uncertainty was enough to collapse an entire operation. One silent doubt that stopped a blade and kept history intact. We'll never know who gave the original order for Grey Ghost. We'll never know the name of the man in the corridor or what became of him. But we do know what didn't happen. Churchill didn't die that night. Britain didn't fall into chaos. The war didn't fracture at a critical seam. And the post-war world, messy as it was, still carried the fingerprint of the man who walked through that hallway unharmed. And maybe that's the deeper truth here. That history isn't just made by those who act, it's shaped profoundly by those who almost did, by the dominoes that stayed standing, by the would-be killers who turned back, by the janitors who forgot to close the door. So next time you think about historical turning points, don't just look for the battles and speeches. Look for the hallway. Look for the hesitation. Look for the moment that didn't happen, but almost did. That's where the real mystery lives. If this story changed the way you think about history, don't let it disappear like a footnote. Give it a like, share it with someone who loves untold truths, and subscribe to the Domino Effect, where we pull at history's smallest threads and see just how far they unravel.